Hello and welcome to another video lecture for Mr. Mosier's 8th grade U.S. History class. Today we're going to be talking a little bit more about manifest destiny. You can't fight it, neither can I. America is moving west. We're gaining land. We're gaining territory. We're going to look today at another one of these territories that the United States is going to be picking up today. Today's story is about the Texas Revolution. This can be found in your textbook reading pages 350 to 353. Our guiding questions today are: why did Americans migrate to Mexico, which we now call Texas? What was expected of the Americans living in Mexico? Why was this a problem? What happened at the Alamo? What does annex mean? And then why did it take the United States almost 10 years to annex Texas? So again, we're looking here at our map of manifest destiny. We picked up the Louisiana Territory right here. We've got the port city of New Orleans. We've doubled the size of the United States. We now have Florida because Andrew Jackson ends up chasing after these raiders of these Native Americans, the Seminoles, and runaway slaves. We end up getting Florida from Spain as a result of the Adams-Onis Treaty. And now we have this large section right here that is making up today of the modern-day state of Texas and a couple of our other southwestern states here too. So let's talk more about how Texas becomes part of the United States. So why did the American settlers actually move to Texas? Well, they moved to Texas because of land opportunities to grow a cash crop of cotton. Actually, there was an agreement struck between Stephen Austin, kind of an American Southerner, who was looking at bringing some colonists of Americans into sort of what we call today East Texas, which at that time was under the control of Mexico. And East Texas was a very fertile land, good for growing a cash crop called cotton. If you're kind of familiar with some Texas geography in college football, you probably know there's something called the Cotton Bowl. Cotton is still kind of grown there in East Texas. So Americans get this special agreement to basically move into Mexico and grow this cotton. And some of the conditions that the Americans had to live under was they had to obey the laws of Mexico, including the law that said slavery was illegal, which is not true in the United States in this time period. Slavery was still very much legal. And a lot of these Americans that were moving into Mexico owned slaves, which they brought with them anyway and pretty much ignored this law in Mexico that outlawed slavery. Tensions begin to sort of rise between the American settlers and the Mexican government, and including some Mexicans living in today what was called Texas because of some of the actions of the Mexican government. There gets to be more and more discussions about a revolution, maybe an independence movement here in Texas. And as a result of this kind of movement towards independence, led by the Americans living in this what we call Texas today, the Mexican forces led by Santa Anna move into Texas, and they end up sort of surrounding some American forces at a fort named the Alamo. So let's find out what happens here at the Alamo. So while defending this fort, the Texans are pretty much all killed by the battle that ensues. There's been a lot of historical research into maybe what kind of happened in this battle. We've got kind of two different accounts. You've got some of the American accounts and then, of course, the Mexican soldier accounts of this particular battle. But one way or the other, the fort falls to Mexican forces, and the fort becomes sort of a rallying cry for the Texas movement for independence. A lot of the Texans living in this part of Mexico are hearing the stories of the bravery of the men who are fighting at the Alamo, including men like Davy Crockett, who you see in this painting. He's portrayed kind of fighting with his buckskin clothing and his coonskin cap, and he's like fighting off to every last man. This probably didn't play out exactly that way, but these stories of bravery are coming across the entire part of Texas. It really builds up momentum for the Texas independence movement and becomes this rallying cry of remember the Alamo, remember what happened to our fallen brothers here at this battle, and becomes this big cry for this movement towards independence. Texans do win a decisive battle throughout these battles and skirmishes that take place called the Battle of San Jacinto. At this particular battle, which only lasts for like 18 minutes, the American forces are able to capture Santa Anna. This is the general kind of in charge of the Mexican army. At this particular battle, they kind of force Santa Anna to say that he's going to go back to Mexico and help secure Texans' independence, which doesn't completely come out that particular way. Mexico never does officially recognize Texas's own independence, but Texans, they figure they are independent now from Mexico. They are no longer part of Mexico, and since there are a lot of Americans now, these Texans have these American roots. They want to become part of the United States. They want to be annexed by the United States, which annex means to add on that territory. But it takes almost 10 years for Texas to finally get added into as a part of the United States. So for a while, Texas remains its own independent nation called the Lone Star Republic. The reason that Texas is sort of held out for about 10 years is because of the issue of slavery. Remember, this is one of the reasons why the Texans were upset in the first place. They brought their slaves into Mexico. Mexico says no slavery, and the Texans said, well, we're going to keep our slaves no matter what you tell us. Well, the United States was having this conversation between slavery and no slavery. There was kind of this desire to keep a balance between the number of states that had slavery. So there's an equal number of slave states as there were the same number of states that outlawed slavery in the United States. And because Texas kind of happened so quickly, there wasn't a free state ready to balance out this adding on as a slave state as Texas. So it takes until about 1845 for Texas to finally be admitted in as the 28th state. So it's manifest destiny. America continues to march to the west, picking up land, picking up territory. Now, by 1845, Texas has now been added into the United States as a U.S. territory and as a U.S. state. And this march towards the Pacific Ocean continues to happen, but there's still a lot of land yet that the United States doesn't have control over. We're going to find out more how that story happens in a later episode. As always, thank you for listening. I'll talk to you guys later.